What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are covering the current run of the Defenders, kind of. Normally, I don't really do this. Normally, I kind of wait until a story arc finishes, or at least I try to wait until a story arc finishes and then cover it. But this one's particularly interesting. I don't know how long it's going to take for Marvel to finish this, probably about another 3 months, but it's really, really cool because I feel like this is one of the things that Marvel does that's going to have effects on the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? So the way this opens up is initially with just Doctor Strange doing Doctor Strange stuff, right? Hanging upside down, reading tarot cards. It's a normal day for Stephen Strange, right? You know, he's just doing his thing. He's literally practicing like magic stuff in his pajamas, right? So, you know, Doctor Strange being Doctor Strange, but suddenly he's met by the arrival of the Masked Raider. Now, the Masked Raider is an interesting concept. This is one of those weird things. I want to say the Masked Raider played a role in the 2019 one-shot Marvel Incoming, which Marvel never did anything with because no one really cared. So Marvel was kind of like, you know, we'll sweep it under the carpet. That's basically what happened, right? I'm not aware that they actually did anything with it. And in fact, you probably forgot about it until I just brought it up. But the important thing here is that the Masked Raider is a title that different people have had over the years in Marvel Comics. Technically speaking, the original Masked Raider appeared in Marvel Comics #1 back in 1939. Yes, before it was Marvel Comics, they actually had a line called Marvel Comics. The publisher was called Timely Comics, and then Timely became Atlas, and then under really Stan Lee, Atlas became Marvel Comics. But back in the 1930s, they had a comic that was called Marvel Comics #1. This is actually where Stan Lee got the idea from to rebrand as Marvel Comics itself. But the important thing here is that while the original Masked Raider had the Eternity Mask wasn't really fleshed out until years later. And the way this works is that Eternity's mask is quite literally a part of the being Eternity itself. And the person who wears it will become equal to whoever it is they're fighting against. Now, they become equal in all facets, right? Every aspect of that. And we'll talk about the significance of that as we get further in this story. The important thing here is that when Stephen Strange faces off against the Masked Raider, there are two things going on. One, Stephen Strange is aware of Eternity's mask. He knows what it is. He knows that it was a mask that was basically assembled by the Knights of King Arthur, right? Arthur Pendragon, basically cultist leaders, different things like that. It's appeared and disappeared over the years. The most recent use of Eternity Mask had actually fallen in the hands of the Enclave, the organization that created Adam Warlock, and more recently had recreated Micheal Korvac, but that the mask itself is one of these artifacts that's highly obscure, but those who know about it are always looking for it. Because if you put on Eternity Mask and then you fought the Incredible Hulk, you would be equal to the Incredible Hulk. And in fact, your strength would actually increase as the Incredible Hulk's strength increases. You would probably end up beating him because you're able to think in a way that the Incredible Hulk's just not able to do. If the Eternity Mask is put on and they fight Doctor Strange like what's happening here, they basically end up going toe-to-toe with Stephen Strange. Now, the big difference here, and this is one of the things that Stephen Strange notices, the big difference here is having power equal to Stephen Strange is completely different than being able to use power in the same manner as Stephen Strange. And that's one of the things that he notices is the Masked Raider is adept at using magic, right? He knows how to use the power of Stephen Strange. And so seemingly the Masked Raider is someone that is familiar with Doctor Strange. Now, the caveat to this is that Doctor Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto, which as we know, historically allows him to basically see everything. He cannot see who this guy is. So it's kind of a mystery who's the Masked Raider, but it was enough that Stephen Strange actually had to essentially cast a spell that would basically strip away their ability to use any of the powers they have and basically devolve into bare knuckle fighting. And ultimately, because Stephen Strange has some measure of martial arts training, he's able to overcome this guy, right? And so once everything kind of calms down, they kind of start having a discussion and it's like, what's going on here, right? Like, why are you here? What's the whole idea behind this? What we're basically told is that somewhere along the line, when the Enclave was in the process of creating Atom 4, also known as the recreated Micheal Korvac, which we covered in our videos on the more recent run of Iron Man, that Masked Raider was there the whole time. But the reason why had nothing to do with Micheal Korvac. Instead, what he was aware of is the fact that the Enclave was going to initiate something called the Reset Protocol, and that the information that the Masked Raider had basically either deduced or had been given to him is that the Reset Protocol was time travel, that the goal of the Enclave was to go back in time and to create a universe of pure science. Now, that really falls part and parcel with the role of the Enclave, and this is one of those things that might fall on people as being kind of strange if you're unfamiliar with the Enclave, right? So we've talked about it before, but honestly, I think we've talked about it so infrequently, and I think it's obscure enough, we could probably do with a little bit of an explanation here, most likely because you'll end up seeing the Enclave in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the Enclave is basically an organization of scientists who believe in dominating the world and really ruling it through technological means, right? They almost treat technology as a kind of religion. They're sort of a cult to technology itself. Now, the real first attempt to achieve this was creating him, who you guys know as Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock was basically a kind of engineered perfect being, and then of course Adam Warlock escaped and has just kind of been out in Marvel Comics ever since, right? So the Enclave has never really been successful in their endeavors, and in fact, this is about as close as it could possibly be. The reason why this matters and why it's so significant is because Zoda, who's basically the leader of the Enclave, ends up basically working to cast what's in effect time travel magic. And so of course the spell book itself is shot by the Masked Raider to keep Zoda from being able to complete the spell. But in the final page that falls, we get a picture of Size Neg. Now this is the important thing here, because Size Neg was a ridiculously overpowered magic wielder. I mean, this guy was so broken. Check this out. This guy was so incredibly broken. They did a whole bunch of things with him, right? He was from the future. He was a person that learned to use magic. He mastered time travel through magical means, went all the way back to the beginning of time, and had actually amassed so much magical energy, he could have recreated the universe, and he did, right? But instead of making himself ruler, he just kind of became the origin point of the universe itself, and then just kind of dispersed himself. And that was it, right? Literally, he was like Michael Korvac, right? The guy was so powerful, he had to end his own existence. It was ridiculous how OP he was. To give you guys perspective, man, like if Size Neg came back now in Marvel Comics at the height of his power, very few people would be able to stand against him. Cosmic entities would struggle against Size Neg. This guy was just ridiculously powerful. The fact that Size Neg is what's referred to as the father of time travel magic basically indicates to Stephen Strange that whatever it is that's going on here, right, like this kind of chaos that's ensued when magic ran wild, is going to affect the time stream. And so in order to keep this from happening, Doctor Strange does something interesting. Because of the fact that, no pun intended, time is running out and their backs are against the wall, what he does is he goes to kind of a somewhat old school way of doing things. He forms a team in the same way that he used to with the Secret Defenders. What does that mean? Okay, so you guys are aware of the Defenders team itself. At least most of you guys are, right? The original iteration of the team was Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, the Incredible Hulk, Namor the Submariner, and then eventually Valkyrie, and a few other characters here and there. The original Defenders was highly popular. People loved it. Marvel ended up canceling it after 125 issues. They brought it back, called it the New Defenders, which was okay. It got canceled again, and then in the 1990s, they relaunched it as the Secret Defenders. Amazing concept, terribly executed. But the whole idea behind this is that instead of Doctor Strange facing off against threats like Dormammu or Nightmare or Mephisto by himself, what he would do is he would turn to tarot cards, and the tarot cards would be read off, and they would essentially tell him who he needs to gather for a particular threat. It was awesome because you would basically see a team assembled that you would almost never see under any real circumstance. And so this weird and wonky team, which was one of the best things about Secret Defenders in the 90s, this weird and wonky team ends up being yanked through time and they arrive in this location that they're completely and totally unfamiliar with, where they're met by a woman who really doesn't necessarily scoff at the idea that like they're off-world or that they are possibly from another universe, and we'll find out why here in a second, and essentially says like, on your feet, right? Like the devourer is here. We also end up learning that like they're basically in the 6th universe. Now here's the crazy thing about this. This devourer looks a lot like Galactus. The problem is Galactus doesn't exist in this universe because Galactus has not been created, right? So if that is not Galactus, who in the world is it? Now, we actually kind of pick up with this devourer basically consuming much in the same way that Galactus would, right? Like assembling its machinery and preparing to consume everything. And these people are basically trying to survive as best they can. Now, the funny thing about this is this planet is called Ta. This is the home planet of Galactus, right? The home planet of Galaan before he became Galactus. All they can really do here is try to stave off as best they can. But what's happening is this particular woman has essentially created a device, right? Now, one of the cool things about this is she has what's referred to as a science fortress. This universe itself, even as it's explained by Stephen Strange, is really a multiverse in truth of science, right? And that's one of the interesting things here, right? Al Ewing's kind of changing things up and not necessarily kind of making a few adjustments. In more recent years, pretty much all the development of the Marvel multiverse has really come down to Al Ewing, right? During his Ultimates run, there was huge developments when it came to the multiverse that had just never really been explored before, right? Like previous multiverses, different things like that. So honestly, I'm cool with him doing this because he's kind of the full-fledged, like, reworking the entire multiverse of Marvel Comics guy. And so what Al Ewing kind of depicts here is that each multiverse was known for a particular thing. That the main Marvel multiverse right now, I guess, is maybe a hodgepodge of different things. I don't know what it would really be known for, but the previous multiverse was a multiverse of science. Every universe across this multiverse was highly devoted to science. Now, a lot of this we can assume is due to a genesis point, that every single universe in the multiverse branches off of the main universal timeline, right, just by like a series of events. And you guys know that, right? We call it the what if series, like what if this happened instead of that happening? So because it all is based on a particular timeline, if that main timeline focuses on science more than anything else, then so would all the other alternate realities. As a result of this, that instead of having like Sorcerer Supreme, you basically got Scientist Supremes is how this works. This particular person is the Scientist Supreme of seemingly this universe, right? She is the most knowledgeable scientist in existence. Now, the funny thing about this is that in Marvel Comics right now, in the main Marvel universe, you have a Scientist Supreme, and I'm pretty sure it's still Hank Pym. I'm not aware of it having changed, but I'm pretty sure Hank Pym's still the Scientist Supreme. But the whole idea behind this is that the fortress is kind of hidden away, so nobody really knows about it. Now, one of the things that happens in the middle of this is Harpy picks up on a smell, not the most important thing, at least not here in the moment, but we also end up finding out that in addition to science, this universe and really this multiverse is not devoid of emotion, right? Like they have high emotions, and in fact, this chick's kind of like, yeah man, emotions run hot. So basically what Al Ewing is telling us, this is a multiverse of people who study science and bang, and that's basically it, which I'll be honest with you guys, that sounds amazing. But we end up finding out the smell that Harpy is picking up on is coming from a baby because his diaper was recently changed. And that's when this woman says, oh, so baby Galaan has awoken from his slumber. And that's when Silver Surfer's like, Galaan. And then you ultimately realize this is Galaan, right? This is Galactus before he became Galactus when he was a little baby, right? Like they've essentially traveled back to, I would even argue, maybe a couple decades before the end of this universe, right? That's one of the weird things. We don't really know exactly how long Galaan lived for before the universal collapse, right? I mean, we can try to assume a 1-to-1 ratio, right? So like the average lifespan of any real sentient being with a human-like physiology would usually run anywhere between like maybe 70 to 90 years, averaging around 80 years or so. But like Galaan was from a different universe and he was not human. So while he looked human, we don't know, right? It could have been that like their guys normally live for like 500 years, right? And that Galaan was 450 years old when the universe ended, right? We don't really know. We're not really given a definitive answer there. Not that we really need one, but seeing Galaan, seeing Galactus as a child, knowing what he's going to become, really kind of shocks the Silver Surfer, right? It kind of stuns him because he's like, this child is so innocent and so small and so helpless, right? And it's just, it's a little baby and it has no idea, and no one in this universe has any idea that this child is going to merge with the sentience of this universe and even the multiverse when it collapses, and he's going to be reborn in the new multiverse with a version of himself in every single universe that will travel around the cosmos and consume worlds, killing countless people in the process, right? Countless beings. Who would imagine this innocent, wonderful little baby is going to become that? And so initially, when Silver Surfer reaches for Galaan, the Masked Raider pulls a gun, right? And it's just kind of like, you know, like almost kind of thinks the Silver Surfer is going to kill Galaan. Now, in reality, you would think the Masked Raider would be behind this, but one of the clues to the Masked Raider's identity comes in a couple different forms. One, the Silver Surfer, because of reasons, right? He kind of chalks it up to the ability to read auras, right? He basically realizes and really knows who the Masked Raider is. More so than that, he knows the Masked Raider essentially knows how all of this is going to play out. It seems the Masked Raider is here more to make sure it plays out the way that it's supposed to, as opposed to making any real changes or actually fighting alongside everybody. The other part of this is that where Silver Surfer tells the Masked Raider, there's no way you can injure me with a bullet, the Masked Raider responds by saying, surely you don't believe that, right? Like, you know who I am, you know what I'm capable of, you know that time is the most important thing to me, you are aware I could probably shoot you with the bullets that I have in here and they will kill you because the bullets are designed to kill anybody because I'm wearing the mask of eternity and it makes me equal to you. So it's one of those interesting concepts because while Al Ewing doesn't necessarily explain it in fine detail, the indication here seems to be that not only is the Masked Raider equivalent to the Silver Surfer in terms of power, but so is whatever it is that's in his possession. And so ultimately, you know, the Silver Surfer's like, no, I'm not here to kill this kid, right? Because if I kill Galaan, I will never exist, right? It would have just insane changes on the timeline. So if anything, I'm just going to keep this intact, right? It's just so strange to me. And so what he actually does is he gives them a bit of a gift, that giving this baby Galaan this kind of knowledge of the universe itself, right? The universe that he will be born into when he officially becomes Galactus will actually serve a couple different purposes. One, it will allow him to sort of navigate the universe without really being unaware of how it all really functions, at least in the early days of his existence. Given how long the universe has been in existence, right? If we kind of assume a 1-to-1, 13 13.5 billion years, give or take, Galactus has pretty much explored it all, right? And even then, if he hasn't, his power has reached such a high level that his cosmic awareness makes him aware of it all. But more so than that, when Galactus was initially born into existence, he was still kind of understanding his powers and hadn't quite come to an understanding of the effect he would have on the universe itself. And so while I wouldn't say that Silver Surfer is imparting this gift on Galactus or on Galaan for the purpose of ensuring that he doesn't become the devourer of worlds, I think he's doing it to make sure that Galaan's able to sort of maintain that human side of him, right? That part of him that still feels emotion, right? Love, pain, sadness, anger, which might kind of be Al Ewing's way of sort of retconning in why it is that Galactus feels remorse even though he consumes worlds, right? I mean, you're not going to see him cry. It's not like Galactus is going to be standing there shedding tears like, man, I really wish I didn't have to do this. It is one of the things that always kind of humanized, Galaan to a degree. And so following that, what we end up learning is that what is basically the mother of Galactus, right? The woman that essentially created Galaan using a combination of her own DNA and what she referred to as a viable donor, has created something that's basically called a mother cube. Now, the mother cube is a weird thing here. It's not explicitly given to us. It is science-based, so it may be one of these things where it's kind of a blend between what we would consider to be a cosmic cube and the Infinity Stones. The biggest issue to this is that neither the Infinity Stones nor the cosmic cube have any real root in magic. And so the way that she explains it here, which is a really genius concept, the mother cube is essentially a containment device based on the concept of the cosmic cube and somewhat mirroring the elements of an infinity gauntlet, but more so than that, it houses emotion. Because this version, this being out there, right, this Omnimax, as she calls it, right, this devourer of worlds, is a being that doesn't feel any emotion. And so introducing emotion to it is like introducing a virus to a computer. It won't know how to process it. It won't have any way to stop it. And so in effect, introducing emotion to to Omnimax is like introducing a foreign antibody into your body that your immune system has no means of being able to defeat. It would kill you. Right now, the goal isn't necessarily to kill Omnimax just because of the fact that it can't really be killed by conventional means. It's to really just put the fear of God in Omnimax and just send Omnimax running is really what they're shooting for. And so once Omnimax becomes aware of their impending arrival, even though they're not really acknowledged, this leads to the arrival of the Herald of Omnimax, which is actually Zoda, right? Like literally Carlo Zoda, this guy that essentially escaped the Masked Raider from the Enclave and was just thrown back in time. This guy is the Herald of Omnimax in this past multiverse. And so a fight basically breaks out between himself and the Silver Surfer. But while that's happening, Cloud uses her energy to basically get the attention of Omnimax, which successfully works because the sheer amount of energy that Cloud's able to put out is enough that Omnimax is actually like, give me this energy, right? Like, I hunger, I need more of it. Keep feeding me, right? And so while Cloud can't feed all the energy that she has, otherwise she'll destabilize herself and basically die, that it allows them a kind of momentary reprieve where the guard of Omnimax is let down. And this allows them to essentially fire off this mother cube, which basically blasts Omnimax with just emotional energy that it never really felt before. Now, one thing that I do want to point out here is that emotions themselves, as they're depicted here, are almost kind of running part and parcel with magical energy, right? I mean, it's kind of raw magic as it's described. I wouldn't say this is Al Ewing kind of copying like the emotional spectrum from DC Comics and all the Lantern Corps or anything like that. And I would say that he's not really saying that emotions themselves are magic, but there are concepts out there in Marvel Comics that exist in this kind of gray area, and that magical control seems to be the only way to really control those, and that emotions seem to be one of those, which makes sense, right? Because emotions are not rooted in science, they're not rooted in technology, they're not really rooted in any tangible thing that you can invent. Like, emotion is just a raw byproduct of simply existing, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to be sentient to feel emotions, right? Like, deer are not sentient, but they do feel fear, although one could argue instinct. The important thing here is that Stephen Strange, while he can't necessarily control magic in this universe, because magic in this multiverse here, it's like having a TV and you have the wrong remote, right? You're not gonna be able to turn it on and off or anything like that. That's basically where he is, right? He can't control the magic here because he's not native to this universe or even this multiverse. And so the result to this is that he's able to kind of direct it, but he's not really able to manipulate it, absorb it, control it the way that he normally would be. And so that's why this magical energy is directed towards Omnimax, which of course sends Omnimax in retreat. The other part of this is that where Zoda was facing off against the Silver Surfer, because Silver Surfer's used the power cosmic longer than Zoda has, he's more familiar with it, even if he's not as powerful as Zoda, which is one thing that's established. This Omnimax character is more powerful than Galactus, which would make sense that his heralds are more powerful than Galactus's heralds. But the power that Zoda has is offset by his inexperience, and Silver Surfer used that when Zoda attacked him, it created a kind of link between both of their power cosmic energies, and the Silver Surfer absorbed those. The result is that this is essentially Silver Surfer as a herald using the power cosmic from a previous multiverse. Way more powerful than he used to be. That's basically what that means, right? This guy is astronomically powerful. And so what ends up happening here is that because of the use of this magical energy, they're kind of yanked through time yet again, and they're sent back to the 5th multiverse. The problem is that when they arrive to this 5th multiverse, this is a multiverse of magical energy. This is a multiverse that isn't really devoted to science, it's devoted 100% to magic, which would normally be Stephen Strange's whole repertoire. The problem is he can't control the magical energy here that we're aware of because he's not part of this multiverse. The person who is part of this multiverse is Mordun. And let me tell you guys something, man. Mordun is god tier. This guy's level of power is insane, and I'm excited to see what happens with these guys. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.